give me your best definition of activism, whether it's your own personal one or an adopted one that you've seen, read, or heard somewhere.
Yeah, so it'll have to be my own personal one, because it's been a while since I've read like explicit definitions of activism. But I think the act part is the key root word, right? It is an action, but I think it's not just one act. And I think that's the difference. I think activism is a lifestyle. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Angela Yvonne Davis, she talks about how when we commit ourselves to the struggle, it must be for a lifetime. And so I think that's what really makes someone an activist, is not, oh, I went to a protest one time because there was this inciting incident. But activism is about strategy and about intention and having like a specific mission and purpose in mind. And also even having like a set of values that guide your activism, right? So it's not just haphazard or incidental, but you are really, really intentional about what you're trying to achieve with the activism, and knowing your role in the activism and that it can evolve over time. And so I think activism is sort of a lifestyle.
Definitely. Perfect definition. I agree with you there 100%, because I think, everybody has that kind of image of activism as that you're standing with a placard somewhere I'm in London, so I'm going to say central London, but it's not necessarily that. Sometimes it's what's important to you. It's what you're conscious of. And it's understanding yourself and your place in society and how you kind of share or deliver that. So what your impact is on the rest of humanity. So I like that. Thank you. The next question is, to what extent has your life been guided by your idea of activism that you just shared?
Ooh, a lot. Sorry, I'm being a little inarticulate at the moment, but yeah, it is my life right now, I think. When I was younger, I always had a heart for justice, right? But I lacked that mission or that specific purpose. And discovered and started my work on colorism and colorism healing. That's when I got the clarity and the vision, right? That I think turns what was just like compassion and like goodwill towards human beings into like an actual activist lifestyle. And so for me, it is the part of the reason I wake up every day, it's the reason I do everything I do, really, is to just make the world a better place. And I am really steadfast in being committed to that for the long term, and just trying to use my gifts, kind of like, Esther starting the Black Knowledge Society, she talks about how she was a writer. And so that was her way in to this space. And so for me, I was also a writer, but I also like to speak. And so and teach, right? And so that is how I've organized my life, is to do more writing, speaking, and teaching to raise consciousness, to raise awareness, to empower people to then go out into their own lives and do what they see fit to do.
Lovely. So just the way that you talk about it, Sarah, I can see that you have a nice warm heart for what it is that you're doing. And it's just nice because it's not an effort, your activism, it's just a natural way. So like you said before, it's a lifestyle activism, and that's clearly what it has been for you. So your life is rooted around what is important to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so to your understanding, how important is activism to the nation building agenda of the Black community?
I think it is sort of a cornerstone to nation building. And I think it's important, I'm going to say this, I think it's important for each of us individually to understand what our brand of activism is. Because when you think about what it takes to build a nation, it requires everyone showing up and fulfilling their part, right? Executing on their task, their responsibility, right? A nation is a system, and a system has different parts. And I think one of the traps that we fall into is thinking that we all have to be doing the same thing, but a nation would not function, right? If you just think about your day-to-day activities, if everyone was delivering groceries, and no one was teaching. No one was like building buildings. No one was like making sure the water ran and making sure there was electricity and making sure, I don't know, like all the things it takes to really run life, to really make life work. And so it's important that, everyone is doing something and not comparing what my activism looks like to what your activism looks like. Because I might be the janitor and you might be the architect, and someone else might be the driver that gets people to and from, right? And so we all have a role to play. And I think we'll see more progress. I think part of the reason why progress seems so slow is because we still have a lot of people who have not like recognized what their role is in the systems we're trying to create. And I think once everyone has that understanding about what their activism is, what their personal mission is, and how it fits into the larger puzzle, then we'll start to see the picture come together, right? But right now it's kind of like we're like scattered puzzle pieces, and like a lot of us don't know like where we fit, or some people don't even recognize that they're part of a puzzle, right? And like, I feel like something's missing, and it is missing, because like you are meant to be connected to like this network of other people and like fitting in right where you're supposed to. So I think we have a lot of this, for some people that is their activism, is helping people to understand that. It's helping people to realize that and sort of spreading that message, right? So there's like the activism of promoting activism, right? And letting people discover, what their personal mission is in the effort to build something greater.
Yeah, definitely. It's a way of, I don't know, I guess you can say digging deep, right? To kind of deep root yourself to see sort of what your giftings and what your talents are. And that's why, the BKS is so much part of my heart, because since just coming here alone, it's just been an educational journey is what I call it, because I've just learned so much that, it wasn't in my eyesight before. It was like a blind spot. Okay, moving forward, we're going quite quickly through these, Sarah, so we're doing well. Why do you think the word activism has received bad press historically?
This is such a good question. I love this question. Because I'm saying this, I'm thinking about a conversation I had a few years ago, with someone who was like, didn't really like the word activist, didn't want to call himself an activist. He was like, well, I don't really like that word. And his explanation for not wanting to call himself an activist was that white people would think he was radical, right? Or like it would scare white folks, or people would demonize him. So because the term has been, stigmatized and demonized, he was saying, well, I don't want to be considered an activist. And my perspective on that is that's precisely what activism is meant to do, right? Activism scares the status quo a little bit. It scares the people who have this hegemonic power in the world and don't want things to change, right? And I also like adding to my definition of activism. Activism is about change, right? It is about creating a world that, is more in alignment with our highest ideals, right, and values. Although, there are people who have like an activist mindset to try and, bring us back in time. That's not, I don't know what I call that, but that's not my vision of activism. But I think that's part of the reason why activism has been demonized. And I talk about this all the time with regard to Malcolm X, because I don't know about in the UK, but here in the United States, people have pitted Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy against Malcolm X's legacy. And so Martin Luther King Jr. has been painted historically in the history books and like just in the culture as the acceptable form of activism. Like he was respectable and he tried to do things in a peaceful way. And, he was, people saw him as being more conservative, even in his like religious beliefs and his politics and things like that, even though what he was asking for was, fairly radical. And then they demonized Malcolm X as being the violent one, the radical one, the militant one, the one who's asking for too much too fast, who willing to really, really rooted in this unapologetic sense of Blackness and love for Blackness, without concern for hurting white people's feelings. And so what I tell people is that those people in power will demonize the word activism, and they'll demonize people who are considered activists precisely because those people are creating change, because those people are redistributing power and redistributing wealth and waking people up to the illusion, right? And empowering people, empowering the masses of people who have been marginalized in the past. And so that's why they demonize it, because they want to condition the general population to see that as bad, right? And so the dominant culture, the current power structure wants people to think activism is bad because activism will ultimately tear down the systems that they benefit from. And so I think that's kind of where that comes from, is it comes from the people who would be most, who have the most to lose if activism were a popular thing.
Yeah, you said quite a few things there, actually. Like when you talked about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So, I find with people like that, a lot of people in the society, but they become so complacent that they don't like friction or to be challenged. So it's that fear of the message that they're putting out there that forces people to sometimes change or adjust their thinking or behavior or something like that. And definitely activists are seen as that kind of militant, aggressive, violent, kind of people. And it doesn't really make sense because the majority of the time that people are trying to be activists, they're actually doing something for the greater good of community or the world. So I don't know why they kind of look at them with such negative eyes, which is, a shame.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what is one simple form of activism we should all be engaged in regularly?
Because there are so many. So let me try to think of one of the many things that people can do on a regular basis. The first thing that's coming to my mind is having honest conversations with the people around you, right? And I almost said educating the people around you. That might seem kind of pretentious to think that I'm going to go out and educate the people around me. But in some ways you are, right? And this can be by virtue of your example, right? And how you live your life alone can educate people. What I mean by that is, for example, myself as a Black woman, and wearing my natural hair and things like that. There are some people who don't understand that that's possible for Black women, that we can be happy just as our natural selves. And so just my presence sometimes wakes people up to the fact that they don't have to conform to white beauty standards, that they don't have to try to repress the way they look naturally. And for you, it could be something else, right? But then also in having honest conversations about your activism, about the things you're reading, about the things you're learning, you're helping to raise the collective consciousness, right? You're helping to wake people up to things. And I think we are afraid to do that. And one of the reasons, I think another element of activism, I keep adding on to my description of activism. I think another element of activism is the need for courage. I think true activism does require some level of courage and bravery on your part. And sometimes you'd be surprised, and maybe you won't be surprised, at how afraid people are to talk about what they really believe and how afraid people are to have conversations with folks. Again, because they might be called militant, or people might say, oh, you're radical, or don't come around here with that. We don't want to hear that. We just want to relax and have fun. And so they're part of the work would entail having having the courage to speak honestly to the people around you. And that could be, you know, someone makes a comment that is anti-Black or something like that. And you say, well, why do you think that? Like, you pose a question to them and you say, have you ever considered this? And here's a book that I recommend you read, right? Like, that's a very small, and I say small in terms of like the effort on your part, but it could be in terms of the impact that it has on that person.
Definitely.
Who's never been asked those questions before.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is, there's so much competing for our attention, attempting to distract us. How do we sustain our commitment to activism?
Oh, these are good questions. Like, y'all, the Black Knowledge Society always asks like deep questions, and I love it. I think so. I think it depends on like the distractions, right? So I just mentioned the need for like courage and bravery. And I think that can be a distraction because activism is work, it is effort. I think it can be glamorized and it can seem like this really cool thing. And like, oh, they're doing interviews and they're on podcasts and they're doing this, and that. And it kind of, you know, the people who would like venture into activism without really understanding that it's work and it's effort and it's commitment. I think that's like one of the first distractions is it's like, oh, I'm just tired and I just want to like go have fun for a little while and not think about this. As I'm saying that, it is important to take breaks, right? But I think one strategy going in is you have to know that it is a long-term thing, right? That it's a marathon and not a sprint. I think that pacing yourself, right, is an important strategy because then you don't burn out, right? And when you're not pacing yourself, then and you end up burning out, then everything else that is a distraction, your defenses are down, right? To be able to ward off the distractions, I guess is what I'm saying, right? So if you're not rested, if you're not practicing self-care, then you are more susceptible to just giving in to the temptations, right? Giving in to like the dopamine rush of some form of entertainment or, you know, being pulled away. And speaking of the glamorization of activism, I think some of the distraction is that drive towards celebrity status. When I was in my hometown in a different state, there was an unarmed person who was murdered by police officers. And so there was a lot of protests, a lot of rallies. And I saw the rise of what I called celebrity activism. So I think there are people who do stuff that looks like activism, right? They are going through the motions of activism. It becomes clear that they're doing it to achieve some sort of fame or like social status from it, right? So I think that's a distraction. The publicity, the fame, the recognition, the money that people might pay you to come on and do an interview, or just like even just having like 500,000 or 1 million followers on Instagram. And now you're like worried about your brand and things like that. I think the celebrity culture of activism that has infiltrated some of the like real work that people are doing, I think that can definitely be a distraction. And so staying humble, be humble, you know, always checking yourself and making sure your intentions are in the right place. And then I think one other form of distraction could be, for me, I get a lot of people who want to distract me in terms of picking fights or playing devil's advocate, right? So they're not actually looking to have a conversation. They just want to distract me from my actual message, if that makes sense. So they'll, you know, like have all kind of like logical fallacies, or they will want to just trolling, right? The trolling on the internet. People might call you names, like personal attacks, to really take your eye off of your mission. And I think that, you know, not allowing myself to feed the trolls is like a colloquialism here, but go down the rabbit hole of not taking the bait, right, of people who are trying to pick fights, or people who are derailing conversations, right, are trying to take me off topic or off course. So I think those are 3 categories of distractions.
Yeah, wonderful. Definitely. Definitely maintaining the consistency of your activism, because that's definitely something that we see, you know, like you call it, the celebrity activism. There's a lot of that going around. And yeah, I think just being around like-minded people, it's just, you know, so important to have a good, I think, you know, network of people to kind of support and, you know, encourage, because we're human. So we're going to have time where we're down, or we need that boost or something, you know. So that's the unity in our community is really important.
Yes.
The final question, Sarah, is, if you can please complete the statement for me. My activism is inspired by...
I don't know. I'm like a very sensitive person, so I get emotional easily. I think I know you're probably like, why? So dramatic. So can it be like multiple blanks? Like, my activism is inspired by the younger version of myself who needed the work that I'm putting out in the world now. My activism is inspired by all the other, you know, Black girls like me and Black women like me, who are looking for what I am offering, who are searching for a space to do some healing. And then my activism is also inspired by activists of the past. 2 of them I named, Angela Davis and Malcolm X in particular. So I'll leave it at that.
It's beautiful, wonderful.